Welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to join us for the webinar, Preparing Your Students for the Future. I'm going to pass it over to our main presenter, Dennis, and let him introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that. And thank you everybody for joining us today. It's my privilege to be able to talk to you about robotics and AI and the future, how these technologies are going to impact the workforce, and what we need to do within our education system to try to get our kids ready for this unprecedentedly large change. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My background is I am not a formally trained roboticist or coder. I have a communications background, and I got into robotics about 8 years ago, really truly quite by accident. But I started to understand through that process how large of an impact robotics and AI was going to have, and it truly is larger than anything we've seen in the workforce. We're at a time of unprecedented change. COVID obviously is large as well, but I, over the past 5 years, have spoken at education conferences around the world. I've talked to more than 20,000 educators. So when I'm giving statistics and stuff, that's kind of where my stats come from. And I've also demonstrated robotics to more than 18,000 kids, inspiring them to want to learn robotics. And we use a kind of a different strategy than what most schools employ, a strategy that's geared towards maximizing engagement. And so I'll talk about why that's so critically important as we move along here today. But what I'd like to do is to find out a little bit about you, different scenario from how I'm usually presenting. So I'd like to learn if you guys could, we'll do a little poll here. Just if you could tell me what grades of students you're working with, that would be great. That helps me to gear the information specifically for the audience. So we've got a couple of poll questions. If we can just answer that, that would be good. And we'll just take a moment. There are some, some big things happening in education at the different age levels. And usually when I do these, I'm talking to a broad range of people, but if I've got a specific group here, then I can customize the information that way. So I'll just give you another moment to answer that. Get a drink of water, because once I get on a roll, I won't stop. At the end of the presentation as well, I'll take questions. If you have questions throughout, you can type them into the chat, and then but I will save the questions until the end before I address them. And it is certainly my goal and intention to answer any questions anybody has. So that'll be at the end there. Okay, Jordan, are we pretty good on those poll results?
Yep. Let me close the poll right now.
Okay.
And then it should share. There we go. You see it, Dennis?
It says organizer must hide poll results to enable screen sharing. Okay, I don't see the results. Can you summarize?
Yep, I'll tell you. So right now we have about 44% elementary and 56% middle school.
Okay. All right. So then you guys are at a place where you're able to still reach people, the kids very easily. So that's awesome. We're able to make a large difference right now. Much different problems at the high school level, but that's good. The second poll question I wanted to ask is, and I try to ask this in each of the presentations I do, it's, do you feel like you have a strong understanding of how robotics and AI will impact the future, and feel like you know what you need to do to get your children ready? And this will help me gear the information. I've got a pretty good sense of what I'm probably going to see in this answer, but I just want to again confirm. If I'm talking to a bunch of people that are very, very confident, then that would change some information flow. If I'm talking to people that are, kind of new to the whole concept of robotics and AI, then I'll skew that way a little bit. But usually when I do these presentations live, I know what the breakdown is, so I'm pretty sure I know where this is going to come out. All right. Anytime you feel confident that you've got enough answers there, Jordan.
All right, it looks like just a few more are answering right now.
Okay.
About 84% of the people have voted.
Okay. So, you know, the 8 years ago, I would have been at the very low end of this scale. Robotics and AI was not on my radar, but it's been almost all that I've been breathing for the last 8 years, and so I find myself in a real neat position where I'm having conversation with robotics companies and AI companies, while at the same time talking with a lot of educators that don't have knowledge. So I'm kind of able to bridge that gap pretty good. All right, Jordan, let's see what we have.
Let's see what we have here. Share. All right, so 6% AI. What's that? Low knowledge, 65%, and medium knowledge, 29%.
Okay, and that I didn't do the math. That adds up to everybody. Okay.
Yep.
That is a very common distribution. The number of people who feel like they're confident that they know what we need to do is very, very low. I've talked to more than 20,000 educators. Less than 50 have told me that they feel totally confident in their knowledge. So about 1 in 400 people. What I want to do is help you first and foremost understand the impact of what's coming, because it kind of produces a new framework when we think about education. And my belief is that every student needs robotics literacy and coding literacy, AI literacy. That's not the same as saying that we all need to be roboticists or coders, but we have to have that literacy. The same way we don't all program our computers, but the majority of us use them all day long. It's the same kind of thing. So what I like to do is to walk through different industries to help you understand what's happening behind the scenes, what changes are going to occur in those industries. And as we go through, it's going to paint a picture that's going to show very dramatic change. And you know, one of the summary of it all is that robotics and AI is going to lead to significant job loss. It's going to lead to significant job change and significant new opportunity. I think we all know that, but as we go through this, you're going to understand why it's going to put such pressure on society and why it's so critical to get our kids these new world skills. So the first industry I like to start with is transportation. When I started doing this close to 8 years ago, and I would talk about self-driving cars, most people hadn't heard of those. Today, most people have. But when I talk about the implications of self-driving cars, usually what I get back are things like, and if this was live, I would poll you all and we would raise hands and get you to interact. But I'll just tell you what the common answers are that I get. Elderly people will be able to get around, less traffic congestion, less parking issues, more fuel efficient cars, visually impaired people will be able to get around. There'll be insurance implications, because if a car runs somebody over and kills them, is that the person's responsibility that owns the car, or is that Google or Tesla or whomever? So all of those are relevant and real implications, but there's one that's very seldom thought about, and that's, if we have self-driving vehicles, do we need bus drivers, truck drivers, cab drivers? And the answer is no. And so all of those careers are scheduled for elimination, for deletion. And it might be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's hard to know what the exact time frame looks like. We only know that it's coming, and it's already starting to happen in some areas where, if you know, in the mines of Australia, you've got self-driving vehicles. Up in Canada, northern Alberta, they're apparently using them in the oil projects. And even in cities, we're starting to see self-driving buses, not transporting a lot of people yet, just in kind of small situations. Northern Europe, the same type of thing, where there's buses with no driver that have passengers, real humans sitting in a vehicle that's not on a track, that's driving. And so as these things increase, it's important to understand that we're going to increasingly have situations like this. You know, it's a Tuesday afternoon. Somebody's going to come home, they're going to flop down on the couch and be like, I lost my job. And, you know, the person has been a trucker for 20 years. And I'm not trying to pick on truckers by any stretch. It's just the career I'll talk about initially. The majority of us do not sharpen the axe as we get older. We're kind of in our career, we're doing our thing. If you're a truck driver, you drive your truck for 8 or 10 hours a day. You pull over, you're trying to deprogram your mind, you're trying to relax a little bit. You're not going, what's my next career? So the majority of truck drivers, as the majority of bus drivers and cab drivers, don't have a lot of the high-tech skills, the new high-tech skills. I'll talk a little bit about the stats for what we can expect. There are forecasts that show over the coming decade that across the USA, up to 40% of jobs will be eliminated by technology. That's potentially up to 60 million people losing their employment. That's a huge statistic. Right? At the same time, there'll be millions of new jobs. We don't know if there'll be 60 million new jobs. We hope so, but we don't know exactly how many, but we know millions. The challenge is going to really be the fact that the jobs that are being eliminated do not have the same skill set as the new jobs that are being created. And I know that's kind of common sense, but I want to run through some industries and we're going to see how big of a problem this can become. So we've got our truck driver. He's lost his job. He's been driving trucks for 20 years. He doesn't have any new world skills to get these new opportunities. And so he's like, okay, what can I do? And, you know, where can I find another job? Because truck driving, this is an important distinction. Once driving trucks is eliminated, it's not coming back. And this is not a, and I apologize, I know this first half of this information is going to be very heavy. There's good information and good news to follow, but we have to understand the scope of change that is coming so we can start to address it. And in those solutions, there's a lot of really great things. But okay, so we've got, you know, potential to 60 million people losing their employment. So the truck driver, his job is eliminated, it's not coming back. Now, if he has to support his family or even just himself, he's like, okay, I have to find a new job. So I often like to ask the audience, what is a job that the truck driver can take because the truck driver doesn't have these new high-tech skills? And often the answer I most often get back is, well, maybe they could move into retail. But we all know what's happening in retail, and certainly COVID has accelerated this. COVID has accelerated the speed that this change will happen at. But even pre-COVID, when we consider the change, like I think it was in 2020, the retail industry in the USA, the forecasts were, not counting COVID, that it would shrink at a rate of 30% faster than in 2019. So brick and mortar retail stores have already been in trouble for a period of time. We start to see a lot of strip malls and stuff that have got vacancies. And that's because online stores are taking over the marketplace. And COVID has only accelerated this. So the challenge is the retail industry can't absorb the people from the transportation industry because the brick and mortar retail industry is also contracting. And we see that at stores like Walmart and Home Depot and stuff where now it's mostly self-checkout, right? And we're starting to see warehouse robots, you know, operating in these stores now, and customer service robots are on the way. And this is an important thing to understand. Like Lowe's, for example, is working on customer service robots. They've been working on them for several years. They've invested millions of dollars into it. And so a lot of times we can understand what's going to happen by putting human nature. If we understand the technological changes that are coming and we apply a level of human nature, it's very easy to see what the outcome is going to be. And so if Lowe's has invested millions of dollars in building a customer service robot, are they planning on doing that for one store? And the obvious answer is no. Once that robot proves its worth, once it crosses a threshold, Lowe's will roll that out in as many stores as it can as quickly as possible, right? It'll be virtually an overnight change. And once they do that, then Lowe's will have a pricing advantage over Home Depot. So Home Depot will have to do it. And certainly the people at Walmart want to maximize profits, and the people at the IKEA and the Fry's Electronics. As soon as this change proves to be a change that saves the company money, it will swing across the entire retail industry as self-checkouts have. So, and it'll go into every big box store, and from there it'll go into the stores and the malls. So retail is undergoing a contraction as well, and it will undergo a faster contraction because of robotics, not just the change to online shopping. And it's not to say that retail is not healthy. Retail is hiring a huge number of people, but a lot of those people are search engine optimization, big data analysis. You know, those are now retail jobs, where before it used to employ a lot of low-skilled people. So now we've got the transportation industry and the retail people looking for more work. What industry can absorb them? You know, where could they find work? And, you know, we're not talking about just like on a large scale, just even one person. What industry could absorb them? And then we would go, okay, hospitality, the restaurant industry. You don't need to have super high-tech skills to be a waiter or a waitress or whatever. But has anyone been in a McDonald's recently? Because now we're starting to see touchscreen ordering. And what we're going to do is we're going to see how all of these industries are going to arrive at the same area at about the same time, and it's going to put huge pressure on the economy. So within the restaurant industry, touchscreen ordering, and I want to put into perspective how that impacts things. At the McDonald's near my house, there used to be 5 people across the front counter. Now there's 1 per shift, 2 shifts a day. So we've gone from, you know, needing 9 or 10 people to needing 2 people. So let's say on average, that's 7 people that are not needed to run a McDonald's restaurant per restaurant, 15,000 restaurants. It's 105,000 jobs that don't exist today that existed 3 years ago. That's the speed with which we're going to see these changes. And now that McDonald's has proven it'll work, we're starting to see it at Burger King, Chick-fil-A, Jack in the Box, Panera Breads. All of these companies will do it. And it's not, I'm not trying to pick on McDonald's or any one company, because, you know, I would like, you know, each of you to think about this from your perspective. If you've spent $750,000 or $1 million on a franchise, and you can put in touchscreen ordering, it saves you $250,000 a year, each of us would make that decision. The challenge is that all of these industries are making that same decision at the same time. So, you know, we're going to start to see some major industries change and contract. That's going to result in a huge pool of low skill technical labor, or low technical skill labor. But it's important also to understand that it's not just about the jobs that are disappearing, and it's not just about the new jobs that are coming. These changes will impact every career and every industry. And I like to, you know, my 2 favorite industries to relate this to, the first one is education. For many, many educators, teaching is not a high-tech job. But if you want to get a job as a new teacher, what kind of teachers are being hired? When we forecast forward and say, okay, 5 years from now, man, all these changes are happening, there's all these new high-tech jobs, the kind of teachers that are going to be in the most demand are going to be the high-tech teachers. Teachers that have robotics, coding, 3D printing on their resume. If you want to be a teacher and your resume doesn't say those things, in 5 years' time, your resume is going to the bottom of the pile. That's where the skill gap is. And it's worth noting that last year at the secondary school principal conference, when I was talking to the principals about this, I would mention that, and their comment back to me was, those are already the teachers that are in demand. And so, again, like in 10 years' time, this will all balance out, and English teachers, math teachers, social studies teachers, everybody, all of the careers and types of teachers will be equally, more or less, in demand. It's just that over the next decade, we've got this real shortfall in tech teachers. So that's where the teaching demand is going to be, because schools can pivot and move staff around to cover other subject areas, because they've got people within their system that know how to teach those courses. Okay, and then the second career I love to talk about is fashion design, Because most people would say, you know, fashion design's way over here. It's super creative, soft skills. You know, you need some hard skills and resiliency and stuff, but it's mostly soft skill type career in our mind. Over here is robotics, and we would think those two are at the far end of the spectrum. But I was in New York City several years ago at a robotics conference, giving an opening keynote address on the impact that robotics and AI was going to have on the workforce. And over the 2 days, I met 20, 25 people from the fashion industry. The first couple of people, you think, oh, they must just have a personal interest in robotics because you think that they're unrelated. But you meet 3 or 4 people in an hour and you start to say, wait a second, there's a pattern here. So I started to say, you know, you're the 4th person I've met in an hour from fashion. Why are there so many of you at this robotics conference? And half of the people told me, basically, if you want to get a job in the fashion industry, 2 of the most important skills are 3D printing and robotics. The other half of the people said those were the 2 most important skills. And initially I was surprised by that, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So imagine that you guys all own a fashion company and you're going to hire 1 new designer. And now imagine that this circle represents all the fashion that's ever been created. All the crazy designs are in there. If you add 3D printing and robotics, the potential is larger. And I can't say it's 20% larger or 50% or 100% larger. I don't really know. I just know it's bigger because you can make clothes that will respond to sound, light, moisture. You could make clothes that change over time. There's a wide range of possibilities. So the new and innovative fashion designs are going to involve technology. And so if you're hiring a new designer, do you hire the person that gives you this potential or this potential? And the answer is this, you know, the larger potential every time. And so we have to understand that these changes that are coming are not just about the robotics industry. Robotics and AI will be a layer across all industries the same way computers are. And we all know that if we were to graduate children from our schools without computer literacy, those children will be significantly disadvantaged for the rest of their lives. The same will rapidly become true for robotics and AI. You know, if you're going to be a manager of a retail store, and that retail store has warehouse robots, customer service robots, you're using big data analysis, artificial intelligence to predict who's coming into the store, you're doing targeted ads, you're not getting up to the management level in that job unless you understand technology, right? So it's really critical. And when we think about it from this perspective and we go, okay, yeah, everybody's going to need this new technology, because the people that we graduate from our schools, we need them all to go into these new jobs and to not put pressure and compete with the pool of unemployed, low technical skill labor. The challenge is about half of the kids that we graduate from our schools only have enough technical education to take the exact type of jobs that are disappearing, right? It stands to reason if half the jobs are going away, roughly half of the kids that graduate from our schools would fill those types of jobs. So we have to adopt a philosophy and an understanding within education that we have to push all education towards technology. We have to start to integrate robotics and AI and big data and all of that, you know, complex analytical thinking across English, social studies, you know, phys ed, the whole gambit, because that's what the future workplace looks like. Now, if we accept the fact that that's what we need to do, what I'd like to do is I'd like to draw a little diagram here and explain what's happening and the challenge that happens with education today. So this is my bell curve of engineering mindedness. So the children over here on the right side of the bell curve love engineering, can't get enough of it, love physics and math. Children over here, not very engineering minded. They love the arts, literature, drama, and then most of your kids are somewhere in the middle. Now the challenge is, and this is really, really true at the high school level. I know that you guys are middle school and elementary, but you have to understand why this is so critically important. At the high school level, when they're teaching robotics, they will typically reach, I'll be generous, I'll say 3% of boys. The number of girls they reach, 0.3%. 3 girls out of 1,000 are enrolled in robotics. And again, I've checked these stats with 20,000 educators. 3% of boys, 30 boys. If you have a school of 2,000 kids, roughly 33 will be learning robotics. And dipping their toe into AI. More kids learning coding, because coding isn't as intimidating as robotics. But really, what we have to understand is robotics and AI are the future of computers and coding. Robotics is how your computer interacts with the world. AI is how your computer will be making decisions in the future, right? So at the high school level, we're reaching 3% of boys, 0.3% of girls. Middle school, the average, and you middle school, teachers or educators can compare this up against what you are doing. The average is 5% to 15%, and that depends on what product is being used. And obviously, the girls, again, skew lower than the boys do, particularly so depending on what product is being used. And then at elementary, generally speaking, man, kids just love to learn, right? So the very best time to get kids engaged in robotics and coding and artificial intelligence and stuff is in elementary, but it doesn't happen as much as we'd like. The next most important time is middle school. About grade 6 is when, in particular, girls start to go to deviate away. Boys do the same thing, but just not quite as much. And so we have to find a way to try to increase those numbers, because here ultimately is the problem that we're going to face societally. Within our schools, we're preparing the top 2% of kids. We're giving them this education. But when we talked about all those careers that were going away, most of those kids are on the left side of this graph. These are the kids that need this information the most, and they're the ones that we have the hardest time reaching, right? We've got to take these kids and push them towards the right side so they've got a great future. And again, this is not about creating roboticists or programmers. It's about helping kids to understand this technology so they can apply that technology to whatever discipline is their inspiration, whatever subject area or career path is their inspiration, right? So, my belief when I look forward is that in 15 years' time, man, the world will be an incredible place, at least potentially, where, we'll have the ability to eradicate a lot of disease. We'll be cleaning up the environment in a big way. We'll be going out further into space. We'll be going smaller, into our bodies, deep into the oceans, volcanoes, name it. We're going to learn so much in the next 15 years. The real challenge is going to be getting there. And we're really going to see, I believe, some significant societal problems if we don't adopt this quickly. And one of the things that's important to understand is the job loss and change comes for us all. But it comes for us first and foremost in North America and Northern Europe, because we have the highest cost of living, right? Nobody's worried about replacing, people in a McDonald's in Nicaragua where they're making $1.50 or $2 an hour. But in places where minimum wage is up to $15 an hour, the restaurants can't bring that technology in fast enough, right? And it's important that we get all of our kids this literacy as well, so that we can start to have really strong and good discussions about what the future looks like. I know a lot of times people are intimidated by AI, and there's a lot of things that, that's justified in a lot of ways. But we need people to understand what it is so we can have educated and intelligent discussions about it. Within the curriculum that we teach, one of my favorite conversations is, I'll talk about, if a person got their hand amputated in an accident and they had the potential of getting a robotic hand, right, to restore functionality, who would think that's a great thing? And I've asked this to thousands of kids. Every person thinks that's a great thing. Okay, what happens if the arm, like I lost my whole forearm? Still good to get the whole thing robotic? Answer is yes. Like, okay, well, what if this is hydraulic and it's 50 times stronger than a human arm? Is that still a good thing? What happens if I decide that I really like my superpower right arm and I decide to get my left arm amputated. It's a choice because I want to have 2 super strong arms. Is that still a good thing? And generally speaking, when I'm on the left arm, everybody's like, no, that's ridiculous. That's terrible. Don't do that. So somewhere between here and here, there's a line that we crossed. And what we need to desperately have is all members of society understanding this so we can have a great conversation about what society should look like. Because there's some things that we're going to do that are going to be incredible and awesome, and some things that we're going to do that you're going to go, man, maybe not. You know, a great example is apparently there's a little chip they can put into your brain that releases a little electrical impulse. And if you have Alzheimer's, it will improve your short-term memory by 10% and your long-term memory by 20%, apparently. Now, if that's the case, anybody who's got a parent or a grandparent with Alzheimer's would say that's a really great thing. But then do we all get chipped? Like it's a slippery slope. So really part of when we're teaching this, it's important that we inspire more kids and we teach younger. And it's also important that we're not just teaching the engineering. You know, another really interesting thing that happened after my keynote at that robotics conference was the number of people that came up to me, because you should know this was when I was fairly young in my journey, and I'm sitting there going, ooh, I'm talking at a robotics conference to a bunch of roboticists. I'll be real interested how they feel about my view of what the future looks like. I was blown away by the number of engineers and roboticists that came up to me and said I hadn't thought about it that way. Like this is going to be a huge thing. And here's the interesting thing: engineers are trained, in school, and their personality is such that they love to go from A to B. Here's where I want to end up. I wonder how I could make that happen. And that's awesome as long as B is ethical and it's a good place to be. But the second thing is what happens when 10,000 engineers are doing that, or 10,000 companies, and all of society is changing in a very big hurry. That's the challenge that we're looking at. And so we have to try to make sure that we've got all of humanity represented at the table in the discussion. And the best way to do that is to make sure that all of humanity has literacy. So I want to talk, a little bit about, I've talked about the problem, the challenge that we face, and I do really think that this is a crisis. It's not understood by enough people. And, I would hope that each of you, once this is done, will go out and say, hey, you should go check this guy out, go view this tape or this webinar. Because the more people that understand this, the better we do in all of our education. We should be teaching about technology and social studies and understanding the implications. When we look back at all the great things in history, we are at a true precipice and a time of great change. We should be discussing those things. And if we're going to talk about history, how does that relate to today and the changes with technology and stuff? And all of a sudden, those conversations about the past become a lot more real. And we're adding some morals and some technical knowledge into classes like social studies or literature. I did an interview with somebody, this goes back a few years ago. It was a writer from Australia. And he said to me, could your robot act in a scene opposite a person? And I'm like, sure. And I explained to him how it could be done. And he's like, or first he asked if the robot could deliver a monologue, like, from Hamlet, to be or not to be. And I said, sure, and I explained how that could be done. Then he said, could it act in a scene opposite a person? I'm like, yeah, and I explained how that could be done. He said, could 2 robots act in a scene opposite each other? And I said, yeah, and explained how it could be done. And I said, you're asking some very specific questions. What are you angling towards? And he said, I'm trying to find a way to get my humanities students some more STEM and to get my STEM students some more humanity. And I think that that's really how we have to approach this in the future. It's not that robotics is a subject. It's not that AI is a subject. Much like computers, it has to be across all subjects. And if we do that, we'll get a nice balanced look at it. And as we kind of navigate through this, the navigation will go better, and we'll end up with more humane applications and a better approach, and we'll end up with society doing better. So I want to just give you the stats because I mentioned I've demonstrated robotics to 18,000 kids. I want to tell you the results of those presentations that we do, and then I'll tell you how we get those results. At the high school level, And I know, again, you're not high school, but this is important to understand. At the high school level, we can consistently get 25 to 45% of kids wanting to learn robotics. And there's some very specific things that we do to make that happen. It's about 70% of the demonstrations I do at each grade level are the same. The high school one's a little bit different. The high school one's got a little bit more meat or grit to it, because the high school kids are running out of time and they just need to know why this is so important that they'll actually do it. At the middle school level, we hit 90%. We can get 9 out of 10 kids wanting to learn robotics. Doesn't matter about their socioeconomic background, demographics, boys, girls, levels of academic abilities. None of those things matter. Okay, we can hit 90%. It was actually interesting. I'd like to tell a little story about, I taught a week-long robotics class in a school that was a rural school, a population of about 3,000 kids in the town, or 3,000 people in the town, a lot of farmer children. And it was a week-long robotics course. So I had 15 boys from grade 7 to 12, no girls, because it was advertised as, hey, do you want to take a week-long robotics course? And so all the girls said gross and they were out. But over that week, every single girl that walked into the library and saw what we were doing with this guy stopped and watched for 5 or 10 minutes. I'd walk over, I'd be like, would you be interested in learning that robot? And they all said yes. The challenge was they viewed robotics through a certain lens, and it's not the right lens anymore. Used to be, but it isn't anymore. So we have to do a better job of helping people understand what robotics is. Anyway, at the end of the second day of this class, I said to the supervising teacher, I'm blown away by your students. It's been 14 straight hours of learning robotics, classroom time, and they're still laser focused. And the instructor said, you don't even know the half of it. These are the kids that are failing or are nearly failing, that don't bother showing up to class. If they do come to class, they tell the teacher to F off and walk out. Those are the kids you have here. And I didn't tell you that before you came because I was afraid you wouldn't show up. And I was honestly stunned at what he told me. I was really glad he hadn't prepped me with that beforehand, because I didn't see that. I saw a grade A level of engagement, a grade A level of learning, and I saw mostly a grade A level in results. And it was because the kids were just disengaged with school and the way it was being taught, right? So we have to find a way to engage more kids, and we do that largely through inspiration and confidence. So at the elementary school level, we get about elementary school ages, we get about 98% of kids wanting to learn robotics. With this platform, you can achieve very strong results in elementary with almost any product, because the kids are super excited about learning. It's cool and neat and fun. So then what you're trying to pick is the best educational value. In the middle school and high school, like this number here, that's a disaster. And so when you're looking at robotics at the high school level, when I say it's a disaster, these kids need this education as well. So it's awesome for these kids, and the way we're teaching robotics, and it's basically an engineering course, and it's incredible. The challenge is it's just not reaching enough kids. So I want to clarify, I in no way intend to diminish the robotics programs we have. They're awesome. Robotics teachers, for the love of God, please keep doing what you're doing. What I'm just talking about in this scenario is the fact that we need to find a way to engage more kids, and more kids from this side of the spectrum. And that's really where the crisis exists. And it's what we've had a challenge doing, right? Because by the time kids get up in the high school area, if they haven't had exposure to robotics and coding, they already think it's too much, I can't do it, it's beyond me. So it's important to give them those tools early on. My favorite platform for teaching robotics is this guy here. Full disclosure, I am now the CEO of this company. Just to be fair, they want to go, well, you like that because you're the CEO. I became CEO of this product because there's nothing in the world that achieves these levels of engagement, right? And that's why I was like, okay, that's incredible. We have to take that out and push that as much as we can to the marketplace. Again, there's lots of good products down in the elementary level, and we don't recommend kids use this below grade 4. they're certainly able to learn it. It's just too much of it can be a challenge for the classroom management, right? So what I want to do is to try to give people good advice on what they can do to bring robotic solutions and into their classroom to give their kids the best opportunity for the future, while also presenting a good opportunity and scenario for the teacher. I know the kids can learn this as young as 2nd grade because I've taught a bunch of kids to do it. It's just a lot with a classroom of 30, so we don't recommend it. I'd like to take a couple moments and just show you why we're able to achieve the kind of results that we do, tell you some stories about that, and then that will hopefully help you guys, if you've got robotics programs, to understand some of the things that we do that you can apply to your own programs. So I just need to connect to my robot here. Just bear with me. He connects with Wi-Fi. 1 second here. I just want to, okay, that's in front. Push that back over. Okay. My mouse is, I apologize, my mouse is jumping all over. This computer is working the robot as well as the webinar, but we'll get her here in a second. Okay. So when I'm doing my presentations to the kids, I think there's 3 things that are super important. First thing is they have to know why it's relevant. Number 1 most important thing, if it doesn't make any difference, what's the point of me listening? The second thing is we have to inspire them. And that's where I think a lot of the challenge exists, and you'll see how we do that. We have to engage and inspire them. The third thing is we have to build their confidence. If we don't get their confidence up, by the time they get to middle school or high school, they'll self-select themselves out. So we have to find a way to build up that confidence. So when I do my presentations, I talk for about, in the middle school and elementary school presentations are very, very similar. I talk for about 5 minutes about the future, all the really cool and exciting things you're gonna be able to do with robotics. I don't get into any of the heavy statistical stuff and the job loss and societal pain that's coming, because the kids don't need to understand that. If we reach them at the middle school and elementary level, we can just give them the information they need to be inspired. I've got my speech recognition on, so he's giving away part of the game here. Just 1 second, I'll shut that off. Okay, we won't have that happen again. I give like 5 minutes of information about how cool it is, how you'll be able to make more money. I try to reach the children on like who's interested in the environment. Oh, there's so many cool things we're going to do to clean the environment with robotics and technology and AI and big data. The kids that I think are interested in having a nice car, man, if you understand this technology, you're going to make $40,000 to $100,000 more per year. Some pretty nice cars, big swimming pools. If those are the things that motivate the kids, at this point, I'm just trying to hit them in their motivation. Then I'm like, okay, we got 45 minutes left. I can keep talking about robotics if you want, or if you want, I can show you what this robot can do. And all the kids want to see what the robot can do. And so I turn to it and I say, JD, show me how strong you are. JD, show me how strong you are. Usually that goes first time, but it's technology, so that's the way it is. Anyway, when I do that and the kids see the robot responding to my voice, the sound when all the chairs move at the same time, that's the sound that I hear, because the kids are like, wait a second, now I want to see this. That robot understood him. And then I'll do this. JD, what else can you do? JD, what else can you do? Now these things were programmed by me, and I'm not a programmer. Anybody in grade 5 up or grade 4 up that learns how to program this robot could program those in 20 to 30 minutes. And that's pretty cool if you can program a robot to do push-ups or a headstand in a half hour, right? That's real fast return on your investment for your time. You can upload your favorite songs. So if I'm talking to the kids, I'll say JD is just a young robot, not really sure what he is. Let's ask him a question, see if he knows what he is. JD, are you a bird? Now the kids are laughing and stuff, and so it's we're showing robotics to be fun. We're not showing it to be an engineering project, right? The kids will learn a ton of engineering on their way to the fun output. That's an important distinction. If the engineering is the goal, then the kids won't be engaged. But if the fun output of the robot flapping its arms and stuff is the goal, then they will have to learn balance, physics, angles, servos, a wide range of STEM education to get them to their goal. And they're excited about learning those things because they want to see the robot do cool and fun things. This next one was programmed by a girl that was 8 years old. JD, can you sing Happy Birthday? So now this robot, and that's the girl's voice. And so it's just one more way to get engagement, right? And like if the kids can put their voice in the robot, download their favorite songs, make movements easy, make cool things happen, then the engagement level goes through the roof. So what happens now is all the kids are excited about the robot. I've still got 45 minutes left in my presentation. And I say, okay, we got some time here. Would anybody like to volunteer to program this robot? At the elementary school, the kids are jumping out of their skin to do it. At the middle school, still a lot of volunteers. People will be excited about doing this. At the high school level, it's a little bit tougher to get the volunteers because everybody's really afraid to look foolish and make a mistake and not know what they're doing. And then they also sometimes don't want to look engaged, even though everybody thinks it's cool. An important thing to do as well is when I'm doing these presentations, I don't do a presentation to a group of 400 kids. I try to keep it down to 60 or 70 children because I want the children to get a personal relationship with the robot. I want it to be central and close enough that they can be engaged by it. If I've got 400 kids, the kids at the back aren't paying attention or having a conversation. And then I've got a situation where some of the kids think that robotics is kind of neat and cool. Some of the kids don't think it's cool. And the kids that don't think it's cool will pressure these kids to also not think it's cool. So what I do is I take a group of 60, 70 kids, bring them in. We get 90% of them to think it's cool. And then we move them out and shuffle in a new group of kids. We get 90% of those kids to think it's cool. And by doing this over the span of a day, we can move through usually most of a school. And by the end of the day, the whole school thinks robotics is cool. And that's game changing in terms of school culture. Now, so what I do is I get the kids up to volunteer to program the robot. In 45 minutes, having never seen the platform before, they'll program the robot to wave, to talk. They'll record their voice and have it come out the robot the same way as the girl's voice in the happy birthday. They'll name the robot and give it a verbal command and it'll respond. The process of naming the robot and being able to communicate with it verbally is so massively engaging. And I've noticed it's particularly engaging for the girls because it's communication, right? And we pull with that just that one thing, the fact that they can name the robot and talk to it and it responds. We pull a huge segment of the the humanity-centric kids over to the engineering-minded area. And then after that, we get them to program the robot to recognize color and to recognize an object. And that object is a student's face, and the robot greets that student by name. Now, in that 45 minutes, the students don't know what they've done. They only know that it was really easy. And I've projected the software behind me on a screen so that when the first volunteer is up, I said to the other kids, whoever's volunteering next is going to need to know what's happening here, so pay attention, because you're going to build on this work. And so, the robot does a wave. And at the end of it, I'm like, give Bobby a hand. Good job, Bobby, yay. And everybody cheers for Bobby. He goes down, he sits down, he feels great about himself. I'm like, okay, who here could have programmed that? Who could program this robot to wave? And all the hands go up. And this is important. I can't overstress how important it is to get that psychological buy-in from the kids. Like, yes, I could do that. Yes, I could do that. All the way through. Every single thing I do, I'm like, could you do this? And they go, yes, yes, yes. So at the end of the class, I can say, so you've all told me you could all program this robot to do all the things that we've done here today. And they'll say yes. And then I'll say, I want to show you guys a video. And Jordan, if you could play that video, that would be awesome.
All right, I got to change the presenter back to me, and then I'll be able to do it.
So just while Jordan's doing that, yeah, just it's important that you get the students to, to acknowledge the fact that they could program this toy to do things that.
Excuse me.
Yes, miss. What can I get for you?
White wine, please.
Coming right up, miss. How was your day, miss?
Pretty good, thanks. Busy, lots of meetings.
Sounds like a really long day, miss.
Yes, it was a long day.
Would you like a menu as well?
Not right now, thank you.
May I have your glass, please, miss?
Of course.
Thank you, miss.
You're welcome.
Here is your wine, miss.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Can I get you anything else, miss?
All right, Jordan, that'll do. Okay, so the kids see this video, and when they see the video, they're like, "Oh my God!" And a lot of times, the teachers will be like, "Oh, we've gone too far," because the robot looks very real. It looks like the iRobot with Will Smith. It looks like the robot from that movie. But I'll say to the kids, "Who thinks they could program that robot?" And sometimes the elementary kids will think that they can, because elementary kids, some of them are fearless, which is awesome. Middle school kids will almost always be like, "No way." But I'll say, okay, who could do that? And and I'll say like, and I will say it in a way that I want them to go, I couldn't do that. That's the truth. So I'll be like, okay, who could program? You guys all think you could program this? Who could program that robot? And they're all like, no, that robot's too powerful. And then I will say to them that big robot uses the exact same hardware and software as this little guy. And you've all already told me you could program this little guy. So let's look at what that big robot did. It was talking. Did you program this robot to talk? And I will wait for them to answer. I want them to engage. I'm like, yeah. They'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So you could program the big robot to talk. Did you program this robot to move servos, to wave? Yes. Okay. Then you could program that other robot to move its arm and pour one. It's identical. Just a few more servos. Did you program this robot to listen? Yes. Okay. Then you could program the big robot to do that. And I'm like, you've already demonstrated and told me you could do 75% of what that big robot is doing. And in that moment, the children's heads, they basically explode. They're like, I could do anything. And that's what I love best about teaching robotics and AI is, yes, we're giving these kids these important skills for the future. But the most important number one thing that we're doing is we're changing the way the kids perceive themselves. And that has so many benefits. Imagine having a class of 5th graders or 7th graders that believe they can program that large humanoid robot. How does that change the type of classes they take in high school? How does it change the type of careers they view themselves in? We're completely changing and broadening their horizons because we've given them some inspiration and some confidence. Without the confidence, the inspiration is that robot looks cool, I can't do that, right? And so it's really important that we build that confidence up. And there's a lot of products out there as well where, like if I don't show that video and tie it back to this product, then it's like, yeah, I can program a toy. But they still don't necessarily have adult confidence or confidence in them at their adult selves. So if we can help give them that confidence, it changes everything. And we've heard from educators that bullying has stopped, that low achieving children are staying after school late to work with robots. We've gotten so many incredible stories about how kids that were marginalized by the system or not high achievers are all of a sudden really doing well. Partly it's hands-on learning, it's project-based learning. Partly it's hope and and confidence. And I really want to implore you, please, whatever whatever platform you use, whatever mechanisms you use, please try to bring robotics to your kids and to build this confidence early, because over the next 5 years, we are going to be increasingly hearing the robots are coming, they're going to take jobs. The robots are coming, they're going to take jobs. And the problem with that, that's a true thing, but the problem with that is if these kids, you're probably like these kids, don't feel like they're roboticists or like they can do it, they have the potential of feeling completely overwhelmed and like they don't belong, like they have no future. And the changes that are coming are going to be happening so quickly. It's so critically important to give these kids the opportunity to feel confident about their futures. It's going to make such a big difference in their mental well-being. And so, whatever you can do to build that up, and any opportunity you have across your curriculum to infuse STEM and the humanities and bring them together, please take that opportunity. It's so critically important. In non-COVID times, we used to go into schools all the time and do these presentations for free to help kids out. And if I happen to be in a city where any of you are, I'm happy to come into your schools and do the same things with your kids to help them along. Something else I'm happy to do is, if this presentation is something that has resonated with you, and you feel, yes, this is something I would like to bring to my school, but you don't know how to do it, contact Jordan and his team and they can bring me in. I've talked to so many administrators about this issue. And a big part of the challenge is that people don't understand how quickly the change is coming, and they don't understand how pervasive it's going to be. So my number one most important thing that I do, and the whole reason I got into this industry, was to help educators understand what's coming so they can prepare kids. And so I'm happy to do free presentations for your staff that look very much like this. And because staff have the same concerns and challenges, right? It's like, well, sometimes I talk to principals are like, we'd like to teach it, we'd like to offer it, but we don't have anybody that'll teach it. And usually it's just, the whole thing is based on a misconception about what robotics is and what it can be. And when people see, and you guys haven't seen the software that we use today, we'll be demonstrating that in a future webinar in greater detail and running through how things work and kind of unpacking that 45-minute presentation. But when people understand why it's so important, they're like, okay, this is something that is worth doing. And then when they understand how easy it is, it's like, okay, well, I can teach that, right? And then, the other aspect sometimes that we run into is, I'd love to do this, but I don't know that we can get the budget. And what I say to educators is, if you want to bring this into your school, again, I'm happy to talk to your administrator, and I can help you get the budget. Especially for elementary and middle schools, we've talked to so many parent associations, and once the parent association hears this information, or you could share this webinar with the parent association, once they understand what is coming, all the parents that have kids that aren't over here, they're like, my kid needs a future as well. And the parents will find a way to make it happen. It's not expensive. Over the span of amortized over 5 years, it's about $5 to $10 a kid. It is completely affordable. And it's, when you think about the scope of challenge that I described earlier, and the fact that it can be resolved for $5, $10, $20 per student, that's an investment that parents are excited about making, right? So, if this is something that you'd be interested in doing and you want to continue this discussion, I'm happy to continue this discussion with each of you one-on-one. Again, you can reach me through Jordan and we'll put it together. Any way that I can help you bring stronger STEM education to your school, I'm happy to help out. If you're like passionate about biology, or you want more microscopes and you don't have a budget for that, all the first half of that presentation still works. And I'm happy to have still that conversation with your principals, just because this is so critically important. We have to get a more technical and STEM education to our kids. And ultimately, I love it when I get the chance to talk to parents as well, because then we can impact the entire educational community. We've got the staff, we've got the kids, we've got the parents. Now everybody's rowing in the same direction. And I talked earlier about what happens when a class of 7th graders is excited about this. But what happens when a school is excited about this, or a school district, or a city? What are the economic difference? What kind of, imagine, forecast forward 5 or 10 years, and imagine a city where all the kids are learning this. Every kid that comes out of school knows they could program that robot. What does the economic future of that city look like? As opposed to a city where they're not doing that. Man, those are two very different futures, right? And we are going to see a situation in the future where some schools will adopt this, some districts will adopt it, some cities, some states, some won't, and it's going to get very territorial. Imagine a situation where, I've talked a lot in New Jersey and New York, so I always tend to use that as my example. Imagine New York State doesn't get into this stuff as quickly as they should, but New Jersey does, right? And so you've got a new job for a teacher in New York City. You've got applicants from New York City and you've got applicants from New Jersey. The applicants from New Jersey all have high-tech skills. Who gets the job? Jersey. Okay, there's another job for a realtor or a store manager. Who gets the job? Jersey, Jersey. It's always the high-tech person that's going to win out in those situations. What happens to the economy in New York? Unemployment is high. People can't afford their apartments. People stop buying electronics and they stop going out to the restaurants. So then those start to fail and you get an economic slowdown and spiral. And we're seeing that right now because of COVID. Like COVID, as bad as it's been, is almost like a temporary precursor to what the future can look like if we don't get our kids this education. Because the economy needs to have a certain amount of transacting happening to maintain flow. And Detroit went bankrupt, it was 2013, I think. And that was ultimately started by the auto industry changing and challenges there. And then the economy slowed a little bit, then the people with money moved out, and then it slowed further to the point where eventually it declared bankruptcy. We're going to see that happen in some locations. So it's not going to be a situation where the future is necessarily going to be great for everybody. It's going to be a real challenge for some people. The key differentiator is going to be how much technical knowledge the kids have. So anything I can do to help you, please contact Jordan and he'll get in touch with me. Okay, so with all of that said, I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up. Give me 1 second, I'll see if I can get back into this. Okay, I've got my screen. I'm gonna try hiding that software. All right.
All right, Dennis, I'm looking
I'm not seeing my chat window anymore, so if you could let me know if you got questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just want to say again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Dennis, for presenting. My name is Jordan Nelson. I'm one of the customer engagement managers with Nasco. I was your host today, and I want to give a shout out to all the educators out there who are still making it happen for students. If you have questions, you can ask them at this time. And then as you're writing them, I did want to make a few quick notes about the last minute details. If you would like to connect with Nasco or Dennis outside of this webinar event and you want more information, feel free to reach out to us at engage@nascoeducation.com. I'm going to put that out into the chat for everybody so that way they can reach out to us in case they have any other additional questions. Also, Dennis did allude to our next webinar as well. So I'm going to put the registration link right into the chat as well. So then if you want to register, feel free to click on the link and then you can register right away for the next upcoming webinar. Make sure too, after this webinar, we do have our feedback or survey. Fill that out. That'll help us for other information, other different topics that you might be interested in. And then I will double check to make sure I have. And then cost. All right, so Susan had a question about what is the cost, Dennis?
So this platform, this guy here, the humanoid, is $550. The rover here is $500. We've got a spider that's $450. And then there's some kits that are in the $179 range. We're coming out with another kit here shortly called the EZAI kit, which will be a camera, a controller, LED, and a push button. So you can like have the robot do facial recognition or have the camera do facial recognition and stuff. run some AI software. This platform, even though it looks really, cute and fun, is powerful enough that apparently NASA uses it for rapid prototyping. And people obviously saw the life-size humanoid robot there. So you can do almost anything. The Easy AI kit at $99 would allow you to start to get an understanding of how AI works, what it is and what it isn't, because there's some confusion there. We have classroom sets. We include free training for teachers that buy this product because we want you to be successful with it. And our training is not just here's how to work the product. Our training is here's how to create a robotics program that's going to super engage your kids, right? We want you to get that 90%, right? So we teach you, and that's kind of the point of the next webinar is the level of engagement that we seem to be able to get is way, way high. Partly that's the product, but it's also partly the techniques that we use. So we want to make sure that that every teacher's got as much knowledge as possible. So yeah, he's 550. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this is when you're comparing this up against other products for price, he's potentially a little bit more expensive than like Vex or Lego, but because he's a preformed robot, he's a humanoid robot, you can use him multiple times in the same day. So you can get 3 times as many kids through with this platform, right? If I'm building something out of Vex or Lego and I've made my masterpiece, nobody else can use that same kit without destroying my masterpiece, right? So with those products, you've got less students per semester that can use them. With this product, you can run through 3 groups per day. And we're coming out with a new power harness for this that would actually allow you to plug it in which case you could run 6 groups through a day. So the opportunity is there for 550 to be able to engage 12 kids per day, which is not bad when you break that out to per semester and stuff and you start to figure out the costs. So yeah, that's 550. We got classroom sets and stuff. The classroom set is 15 robots. It's 5 of those, and 5 of the hexapod. And that is 9,000, including curriculum. Our curriculum was written by a social studies curriculum writer that knew nothing about robotics or electronics. I worked with her to give her the knowledge she needed to write that curriculum. But we chose somebody that had no knowledge because we know that's where a lot of the teachers are coming from, and that's certainly where the kids are coming from. So it's a self-directed curriculum that anybody can teach. And it was interesting the number of times that working on the curriculum, well, it can be well described like this. I sent her one of these humanoid robots and said, okay, the first thing we need to do, power switches on the back, turn on the robot, we need to calibrate the servos. And her response to me was, what's the servo? I'm like, okay, we take a step back. First thing we need to do is explain the parts of a robot. So we've got a real nice digestible curriculum that anybody can learn and anybody can use and teach. Right. One of the quick question I'll just go into, this almost always gets asked, is programming languages. Blockly, Scratch, JavaScript, Python, and C++. All
right. A couple questions did come through as well. They were wondering if all of these are available at Nasco. They are. I did send a link to the products if you are interested in the chat box. I also did send in the same chat box, if you check on the control panel, that there should be a link for the next webinar. The webinar tomorrow is a different webinar. The next one is dated, I believe, for February 9th, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Dennis? Yes.
I think that's correct, but I wondered if there was another one that was maybe on February 2nd, and I'm not sure why I think that.
Okay, so how to engage your students in STEAM subjects is the title of the next webinar, and that's on February 9th. And so that will be the next one for this series, if you are interested. I'm not seeing any other questions, which is okay. And if you do have some, or if you, yeah, then it feels good, right? But if there are some after this, feel free to reach out to us at that engage@nascoeducation.com. We're more than willing to further this conversation. And again, also with the survey. there's going to be opportunities for you to fill out some information there. I did also load some handouts in the control panel. If you go there, it's titled Easy Robot About Us with Nasco, and then Steam Handout with Nasco. Both of those handouts are available as well. If you have any other further questions about those, you can also reach out to us. But otherwise, I do have a raised hand. Susan. I think Susan might have a question here. Let me double check. So you're self-muted, Susan, but if you unmute yourself, you should be able to talk. Susan, did you have a question? I'm not finding it, Susan. She's unmuted, but apparently having a little bit troubles communicating with us, and that's okay. But what we can do, Susan, is we can follow up after the webinar with you about the questions you have too as well, just in case we can't do that right now. All right, nope, Susan does not have. Okay, so yep, we'll follow up with you, Susan. Sounds good. All right, thank you. Well, that concludes the end of our webinar. Again, thank you guys, everybody, for attending, for the questions to Dennis. Thank you, Dennis, for your time. I know you're a very busy man.
Thank you.
Currently doing a lot of virtual conferences and currently in one right now as well. So wish you well, and thank you, everybody, again. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at engage@nascoeducation.com. Take care, everybody, and have a great week.
Thank you, everybody.